Arsenal Football Club, a team that these last couple years have been talked about in two ways. A team that has improved a lot, that is playing incredible football under Mikel Arteta, and have built a great squad to compete against any side in Europe. And the other way they've been talked about is a failing team that every single time they're close to glory, they're close to reaching the major trophies, they always fall short. In this video, I'm going to be objective and neutral as possible because, as you can see from the flag behind me, I'm a Barcelona fan, so I don't have any love or hate for Arsenal. When it comes to the Premier League in general, I don't particularly support any team. You know, I have some care for Manchester City just because of Don Pep Guardiola, who's my man. But besides that, I don't really care what happens in the Premier League. But Arsenal have definitely been an interesting case. You know, they've definitely piqued my interest because this last couple decades, Arsenal have definitely been a side that's been trolled consistently because they just haven't won any major trophies. They haven't won the Premier League, and I'm pretty sure now 2 decades now. When it comes to European football, let's not even talk about that. They've been trolled consistently. You know, a team that consistently just struggle to get top 4, just can't compete. They're nowhere in the talks of the top sides ever played, especially when it comes to these last couple years. But no one can deny, since Mikel Arteta has joined back in 2019, that he's improved this team massively. He's improved them a lot into a competitive side who are consistently fighting for the Premier League, who are getting top 4 easily now, and also a team to be forced to be reckoned with in the European football as well. So no one can deny he's done a great job, but now crossing the finish line, getting to the top of the top, reaching the top echelons of the best teams that we've seen, he hasn't been able to do it with his Arsenal side. So many times getting close to the Premier League title, consistently getting second place. When it comes to European football and the Europa League, they couldn't do it. And last season, the Champions League, when they had to play against PSG, they just couldn't do it either. And last season, they actually had a very impressive campaign in the Champions League, but they just had to play one of the best sides in Europe at that time. So that was unfortunate for them. But the question is why? Why haven't they been able to do it? They definitely have a great squad. You know, there's definitely factors as to why they couldn't do it. But one thing definitely has to do with Mikel Arteta himself as a manager. You know, he's come in as a very young manager to this Arsenal side, and these last couple years have definitely been a learning experience for him as well. But when it comes to coaching a top side like Arsenal, learning really shouldn't be the case for a manager. You know, you need to get this experienced manager who can get you over the line, who can win you these major trophies, and Mikel Arteta just hasn't been that guy. You know, he's definitely got this side to play incredible football. No one can deny that, but as a Barcelona fan, I know this better than anyone. Incredible football doesn't mean anything if it doesn't lead to trophies. When it comes to Arsenal squad, they definitely have the team to compete against any side in Europe. You know, Mikel Arteta, since joining Arsenal, has done an incredible job to get rid of the waste, revamp this team to the team that he finds ideal to play the system that he wants to play. Bring in the right players that fit his system and play how he wants to play. When you talk about the likes of Declan Rice, when you talk about Julian Timber, Saliba, bring him back from loan, you know, he has built a great squad. No one can deny that. Even this transfer window, they've done an incredible job as well. I can give them so much props for how proactive they've been in the transfer window. You know, some people complain, you know, they've definitely taken their time, but, you know, they've gotten the right signings. When we talk about Mosquera, Kepa, ZUBIMENDI, Madueke, and the latest signing, which was something Arsenal fans have definitely been feeding for a while, which is a striker with GYOKERES. So they definitely have a great team, and, you know, with the signings they've currently just made, they definitely have the depth now. They definitely have the depth to compete against most sides. You know, you could probably nitpick some positions, maybe getting a proper left back to give some competition from MLS for Miles Lewis-Skelly, or maybe get a proper left back to, you know, put Miles Lewis-Skelly somewhere else in the pitch, you know, maybe get a proper right back, maybe get some other positions to reinforce. But besides that, they definitely have the squad to compete against most sides in Europe. Now, do I think they have that star player that could be a complete difference maker, like when we think of the likes of Lamine Yamal, you know, Kylian Mbappe, you know, these kind of players that just have that start in them to make things happen when, you know, things are down, when the team is struggling? Kind of. You know, Bukayo Saka, I rate him highly. I love Bukayo Saka. I rate him very highly, but sometimes he disappears. Sometimes he isn't that player that's always involved or creating a chance out of nowhere. So when it comes to that star player, I think right now, they just don't have that. They don't have that. You know, I don't think Odegaard is that player. Martinelli is definitely not that player. Victor Gyökeres is coming in. He's definitely going to be a striker that's going to need support from his team rather than him being that star striker to, you know, carry Arsenal like maybe likes of Luis Suarez once was for Liverpool or for Barcelona. Like, I don't think they have that kind of star player to get them over the finish line or get them over the games where they're going to definitely struggling. You know, they're always going to struggle. So that star player, I think they're definitely mixing that X factor. You know, that was talked about going into this transfer window for Arsenal, maybe getting the likes of Rodrigo, who if they had signed Rodrigo, which I don't think at this point is going to be possible, it would have been that star signing for sure. You know, that very statement signing saying that, hey, we're ready to compete. You know, that's, if you guys don't follow my TikTok, definitely go follow my TikTok, link in the description. But I made a video a while ago that Viktor GYOKERES coming in is definitely a great signing because he's a top striker for sure. We're going to see how he adapts into the Premier League. But besides that, I don't think it's a statement signing. You know, I don't think it's a statement signing like the likes of Rodrigo coming into Arsenal would have been, because that would have told you right there, hey, Arsenal are not playing around this season. They want to compete. They want to be the best team in the world. And Rodrigo would have been that signing, but unfortunately, that's just not going to happen at this point. But besides that, Arsenal definitely do have a great squad, but I do still think they're missing that difference maker, that star player that can just win games for them. So, you know, we'll see if the likes of Bukayo Saka could be that guy for, you know, next season. He's still a young player, but I still think they're missing that kind of player. Definitely the two main signings that Arsenal have made are the likes of ZUBIMENDI and Viktor GYOKERES. You know, GYOKERES, again, that striker that Arsenal have been fiending for so long now. You know, playing the likes of Kai Havertz as a striker when they signed them. Playing even Mikel Merino, who's definitely been a revelation playing as a striker because for somehow he's gotten them goals. But they haven't been that prolific striker that Arsenal have been looking for, like Viktor GYOKERES will be for them going into next season. You know, Kai Havertz has done a pretty good job. You know, I'm not going to deny he's done a pretty good job since coming in. He's definitely gotten some good amount of goals for Arsenal, but he's definitely not that goal scorer. That goal scorer that needs to be at the right place at the right time or finish those clear chances that he should be finishing, because he's definitely had some bozo moments where you're just like, how did you not finish that chance? How did you not get into the right, you know, space or area to finish those chances? So he's definitely going to be a depth player now going into next season. But Viktor GYOKERES is coming in. You know, we already seen, you know, his track record in Europe, you know, how many goals he scored in the Portuguese league. You know, he's done an incredible job. He's a top striker for sure. You know, he's a guaranteed goal scorer for you. But obviously, coming into the Premier League, you know, there's definitely question marks. You know, we've seen players come into the Premier League from other leagues and not been able to, you know, kill it and do similar things than what they did in their, you know, former club. Like maybe the clearest, you know, example was the likes of Darwin Núñez when he went to Liverpool. You know, how many goals he scored for Benfica, how much of a top striker he was for Benfica. But when he went to Liverpool, he was, you know, he was ass. You know, got in some clear opportunities and he would miss the, you know, the easiest opportunities. So there's definitely question marks for Viktor GYOKERES if he's going to actually kill it for Arsenal. I think he is. You know, I don't have any doubts that he will kill it because, again, on the ball he's a great player. In the box, you know, he's amazing in the box. Like, he knows how to find those, you know, areas to score goals. You know, just banging goals. You know, he's pretty good in the tight spaces. Maybe aerially, like, he's not the best. You know, he's probably not going to be, you know, those big strong defenders and like center backs and, you know, in an air battle to win you a bunch of headers. But if you feed him, if you give him the ball to his feet, he's going to bang you in goals. And I can guarantee you that. And Arsenal have definitely been a side that create a lot of chances. They create so many chances when you have the likes of Bukayo Saka, who's such a creative player, such an incredible player on the right side, who just finds the right players at the right time. But unfortunately for him, he just hasn't had that goal scorer in his team. Now with Viktor GYOKERES coming in, it's definitely going to be that goal scorer that he's been waiting for, that especially Arsenal fans have been waiting for. So again, we're going to see how Viktor GYOKERES does, but I think he will, you know, he'll kill it for them. When it comes to the likes of ZUBIMENDI, he is a top player. You know, I'm a Barcelona fan. I remember when Xavi was feeding for him, wanted ZUBIMENDI, but, you know, we're broke as hell, so we can't even afford him. But ZUBIMENDI is definitely a top player. You know, he showed it at Real Sociedad, and even recently with Spain, because we all know that Rodri's been out, so Rodri not being there, they needed to find another six, and ZUBIMENDI has been that guy. He's been incredible for Spain. He's been incredible for Real Sociedad these last couple of years. So this is definitely a top signing, Obviously, when it comes to Arsenal squad in the six, you have the likes of Norgard coming in, who's, you know, probably going to definitely be the substitute. And obviously, when it comes to Thomas Partey, we all know the situation when it comes to him. Like, he's pretty much done at this point. But ZUBIMENDI is definitely a top signing. He's definitely fits Arsenal's system, definitely fits the way that Arsenal want to play football. You know, he's very confident dropping deep, collecting the ball, you know, progressing the ball, great at passing. You know, he does everything great that you would want as a six. Maybe the thing that he's lacking when you compare him to the likes of, you know, Thomas Partey is definitely that physical stance. You know, he's definitely going to have to, you know, take his time to adapt to the Premier League, because it's definitely a way more physical league compared to La Liga, which is more, you know, tactical and more slowed down. So he'll definitely have to adapt to that, but thankfully for him, he has the likes of Declan Rice right next to him, who's going to support him a lot. So that's great for him. So I think ZUBIMENDI is going to kill it for Arsenal. He's an incredible player, so definitely a great signing for Arsenal. And quickly talk about the other transfers with the likes of Kepa, Norgard, and Madueke. Norgard is always going to be a substitute for ZUBIMENDI. Kepa is obviously going to be second choice for David Raya. And when it comes to Madueke, I definitely think he's a good player. You know, definitely a confusing signing. A lot of people were confused as to why Arsenal dropped the bag for him, but he is a good player. He's a good winger. He could definitely take on this player. He's very skillful. You know, he's a threat going forward for sure. The only things I would have criticized for him is definitely sometimes he's selfish. I think he's selfish sometimes in the final third. Sometimes he takes too long to make the right decision or make a decision at all, But besides that, he is a top winger. We'll see if he's going to start on the left because usually he plays on the right. But, obviously with Bukayo Saka being there, he can't play there. So he's probably going to start on the left, which I don't really think there's much of a difference between him and Martinelli. Martinelli's not that, not that great either. But, that's something that Mikel Arteta will definitely have to work with Madueke, get that selfishness out of him and, tell him, hey, you have to play as a team. You have to feed your striker, you have to make the right decisions because he's still a young player for sure, so he can improve these things, right? But definitely something Arteta will have to work with. Now on to expectations. What do we mean when we say expectations? I think it's pretty obvious. Trophies. At the end of the day, it's all about the trophies. You play all these games throughout the whole calendar year to potentially lift the trophy at the end of the season. Cement yourself as the best. That's why you're lifting trophies, right? When it comes to League Cups or the Premier League or the Champions League, all of these trophies matter for the individual club. A clear example of this is last season with Tottenham. Tottenham in the Premier League were disgusting. They were terrible. They were atrocious. But they masked it up by winning the Europa League, a trophy after many, many years, and in the end, a European Cup, right? So Tottenham fans, forgot what happened in the Premier League because they were happy to celebrate that they won a European Cup. That's why Ange definitely got got away with it a little bit. But besides that, it's all about the trophies, guys. It's all about the trophies, and we all know when it comes to Arsenal, these last couple of years, it's been a failure for them. They haven't been able to get over the finish line, cross that line of becoming champions. When it comes to the Premier League, again, it's just second. Like, at this point, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for them to continue finishing second. Like, what will it take for them to finally become Premier League champions? Because when we talk about these last couple of years, they've definitely been the 1 and 2. 1 and 2 with Manchester City, and last season with Liverpool, maybe not that much compared to the seasons prior, because when Man City, it was definitely a close battle. Last season, Liverpool pretty much got away with it pretty easily. But Arsenal have definitely been competing, but they just couldn't get over the line. They just couldn't do it. Manchester City has definitely been a thorn in their ass. But besides that, Arsenal have had clear opportunities to win this Premier League. Mostly looking at the 22-23 season, where at one point they had an 8-point advantage, and then they win 3 games in a row, just dropping points, and they pretty much gave the lead to Manchester City, which is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Okay, maybe that season you can give a lot of credit to Arsenal because it was definitely unexpected for them to compete in the league. A lot of people were surprised, especially Arsenal fans. They were definitely surprised that Mikel Arteta got them to compete. But from your mistakes, you learn from them, right? You try to learn from your mistakes, and the next couple seasons, they just haven't been able to do it. Of course, other factors fill in when, Mikel Arteta probably doesn't get the right backings, which is definitely a striker, which they've been fiending for these last couple years. And, of course, injuries. A lot of star players getting injured, a lot of players getting injured at the right moments. Just talk about that 22-23 season, how Saliba got injured towards the end, towards the important games, and he was definitely a missing factor. Last season, you could talk about Gabriel going down when they had to face PSG in the Champions League. It was definitely a missing factor for sure. But this is how great managers are made as well. This is how great managers are made, and Mikel Arteta has to work with what he's got. That's just how it is. In football, many things can happen. Football can change like that. It can change quickly. A lot of things can happen quickly because, they're playing a lot of games now as well. A lot of players are getting injured a lot. So Mikel Arteta definitely has to work with what he's got. This is how great managers are made, and unfortunately for him, he just hasn't been able to do it. And when it comes to European football, it's basically been a story of the lives of Arsenal fans where they just haven't been able to do it. These last 2 seasons, they've been playing in the Champions League, going out to a Bayern Munich side that just weren't the best Bayern Munich side we've seen in a long time under Thomas Tuchel, and last season with PSG, which was unfortunate for them, but it was just a lack of competitiveness, lack of having any threat to this PSG side who were definitely, vulnerable at times. But overall, when it comes to next season with Arsenal, I do definitely have them as a contending side for the Premier League for sure. And for the Champions League, when it comes to Champions League, European football, these cup competitions, anything can happen. But I think the minimum expectations definitely have to be just smaller trophies, an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup. They have to win one of those. Because these last couple years, how they've been getting knocked out, how they haven't won any of these trophies is unacceptable. It's unacceptable because the great teams fight for all the trophies. They don't just focus on one. Definitely moments where you can say, okay, let's just focus on one because we don't have the squad, we don't have the team, we don't have, this great team to compete for all the trophies for sure. But Arsenal these last couple of years have definitely been a side that have been able to compete for most of the trophies. So for them not to be able to win the FA Cup and Carabao Cup, going out to teams they should be beating, is unacceptable. So those definitely have to be a minimum expectation. At least reach the final. You know, if you're going to lose in the final to a top side like Liverpool or Manchester City or even a Chelsea, who in cup competitions we all know that are very effective and they always, you know, tend to win them, fair enough. But not even reaching the final, you know, not even trying to win it is unacceptable. Now, when it comes to the Premier League, unfortunately for them, I think this is going to be a very, very tough season for them. I definitely think they're going to get top 4. I have no doubts that they'll get top 4 because they're still definitely way better than a bunch of the other teams that are in the Premier League. But comparing this season to the last couple of seasons is very different. Last couple of seasons, we've seen that Arsenal, again, have been 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. But when we talk about the other teams, like the other top 6 teams, you know, other top teams that, you know, usually compete for top 4, usually compete for the Premier League, they haven't been the greatest. You know, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Tottenham, even Liverpool, when it comes to the 22-23 season, they were awful. Like, these last couple seasons, a lot of the top teams weren't competing. They weren't the best teams. You know, they weren't this competitive size that would give problems to the likes of Manchester City or Arsenal. Arsenal, when we would go up against a Chelsea or a Tottenham these last couple seasons, we all gave it to Arsenal. We all gave it to Arsenal because the other teams just weren't as great as they are going to potentially be going into next season. I think next season they're going to do much better. When you talk about Chelsea, when you talk about Tottenham, when you talk about Aston Villa, Newcastle, these teams are going to be way more competitive than they were these last couple seasons. And I think it's going to be very much more tough for Arsenal to try and win the Premier League. You know, these other teams who before weren't a problem for Arsenal are going to be a problem next season. And we're not even talking about the two teams that a lot of people consider the best teams in the country when it comes to Manchester City and Liverpool. I think we all have Liverpool as the favorites to win this next Premier League, but Arsenal definitely have the chance to win it as well. But it's going to be a lot more tougher. You know, it's going to be a lot more tougher for them to win this Premier League. And honestly, I don't see them winning it. I don't see them winning it. I think Liverpool will definitely be favorites, and I think Manchester City will make a comeback. You know, already know that City have been a thorn up the ass of Arsenal these last couple seasons, and I think next season is going to be the same situation. You know, last season Arsenal handled Manchester City, you know, beating them 5-1, impressive. But when it comes to Pep Guardiola, the money they spent, the backings they brought into this new Manchester City squad, you know, it's going to be tough for them as well next season. So I think, unfortunately for Arsenal, they missed their chance, and next season is really going to show. If they do win it, if they do end up winning it, it's going to show how great Mikel Arteta is. You know, it's going to show his greatness, because that's where managers, the greatest managers, are made. When all the odds are against you, when so many other favorites are ahead of you, and you end up winning it, you know, kudos to that. Impressive. And when it comes to the Champions League, you know, anything can happen in this competition. You know, we've seen many surprises in this competition. You know, 2 seasons ago, Borussia Dortmund gets to the final against Real Madrid. We've seen in the past how certain teams have won the Champions League without doing great in the respective league. So anything can happen in this competition, and, you know, Arsenal definitely do have the potential of winning it. It's not going to be easy for sure, because one thing's for certain, they don't have the experience of being this, you know, European champion, so that might affect them. But at the same time, you can't discard them. You can't discard them. Anything can happen in European football, and Arsenal, again, definitely do have the side to compete against any side in Europe. And Mikel Arteta has shown that he is a top manager to compete against most of the other top managers for sure. So I'm not going to discard Arsenal in any way. Again, just looking at last season, how great they did in the Champions League. When it comes to the league phase, they got into the top 8. I think they only lost 1 game, which was against Inter Milan. But besides that, they pretty much just destroyed any other team. But again, the unfortunate thing for them was last season they had to go up against PSG, who were just the best team in Europe. Maybe if the likes of Gabriel was available, it could have been a different story. Who knows? But besides that, they had to go up against a tough side for sure. But yeah, I'm not going to discard Arsenal. Do I think they're going to do it? No. I just have other teams in front of them. And again, like I said earlier, when it comes to having that star player who can be a difference maker for you, I don't think Arsenal have it. I don't think Arsenal have it. When we think about the top teams in Europe, a lot of the top teams have a player like that. When it comes to PSG, they have Doué, Dembélé, Kvaratskhelia. When we talk about Barcelona, we have Rafinha, Lewandowski, Lamine Yamal. When it comes to, let's say, a Bayern Munich, they have Harry Kane, Olise, Musiala. You know, a lot of these top teams have these top players that can just create something out of nothing. You know, be that star player that can win games for their teams. I just don't think Arsenal have that. Again, I rate Bukayo Saka highly, but I think at times if you double team him, if you triple team him, if you take out Saka from the game, it's going to be very difficult. When it comes to Martin Odegaard, he's definitely been a guy who's been very inconsistent. Like last season, he was bad. You know, we'll see how he does next season, but he was bad. And when it comes to the rest of the team, I just don't think it's enough, you know, that star player to win games for Arsenal. So that can definitely be the difference between them just competing and being the champions. So again, anything can happen in the Champions League. I won't discard them, but I can give them potentially semifinals. I could give them semifinals again, because again, Arsenal just a great side for sure that played great football. They just have to get over the mental barrier when it comes to playing against the top sides. When it comes to playing the top sides, they have to get past that mental barrier that I think most of the time they just think like they're below. Like when it comes to Real Madrid last season, I remember I made a video saying that Real Madrid were probably going to get through just because of their past experience of winning the Champions League multiple times. But I didn't discard Arsenal fully. I didn't discard them at all because I knew Arsenal were top side, and how Real Madrid were last season, they weren't great. But a lot of Arsenal fans I saw like completely discarded themselves for this, for that matchup, like saying that Real Madrid are probably going to beat us. But we saw how it ended. Arsenal were way better than Real Madrid over 2 legs. So Arsenal just have to get over that mental barrier of being the underdogs and think themselves as a superior, think themselves as potential champions. So we'll see how Mikel Arteta changes the mentality of this team from being a competitive side, a team that's going to compete and maybe win the trophy, to finally a team that can get over the line and become champions of Europe. Now, the main message is definitely for Mikel Arteta. Mikel Arteta, you're going into your 5th season. You're going into your 5th season. For me, as of now, like you should have been gone. That's my opinion. You should have been gone. But again, the Arsenal fan base, certain Arsenal fans and the board trust you. They still trust you to lead this side to glory. Going into your 5th season, it is mandatory for you to win a trophy. And I'm not even talking about the small trophies. For me, in my opinion, I think they must win a major trophy, which would be the Premier League or the Champions League. At this point, it's gotten way past just winning the FA Cup or winning the Carabao Cup. It's gotten way past that. They need to win a major trophy under Mikel Arteta. Show what all the money they've spent revamping this team into the ideal team that he wants, all this years of work has led up to. Because just falling short all the time is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Again, it's a split between Arsenal fans where some accept it or are fine with it because they just don't see anyone replacing Mikel Arteta, and the other side who are getting fed up with him, who are getting fed up with him not getting this team to success. So, Mikel Arteta, the pressure is definitely on. This season is definitely going to show what he's made of. I definitely think it's going to show what he's made of, what all these years of experience have led up to. Because again, next season is going to be very difficult, not only for your respective league, but in Champions League and football as well. So it's going to be a lot of work for what he's going to be, able to do with his Arsenal side, what these signings, that he's brought in, spending a good amount of money, getting the signings that he's wanted. What are they going to do for this team? And they're going to improve it or not? We'll see what he does for next season, but I think personally it will be his final season if he doesn't win the major trophies. If he does win the major trophy, like the Premier League more, I would say, then boom, he's good. He's safe. He'll stay at Arsenal. But if he doesn't, I think it's pretty much done. But yeah, guys, that was the video for today. Let me know down in the comments what do you guys thought about the video. What do you guys think about Arsenal going into the 25-26 season? Any Arsenal fans out there, what are your expectations for Arsenal going into next season? Do you guys have hope that you can win the Champions League or the Premier League, or again, just having the minimum cups as well, like FA Cup, Carabao Cup? Do you have hope that you can win these trophies, or do you think Arteta isn't that guy to lead you to those trophies? Let me know down in the comments below, but make sure to like, subscribe, favorite, hit the notification bell for every time we upload. Share to your friends that love football, and I'll see you guys in the next video, whenever that is. Much love, take care, and peace.